Magic and determination are the two biggest points in the Undertale community for things that are argued about. A lot of people can't seem to agree on how magic and determination work, who has determination naturally, who has magic naturally. So I thought of a theory that I think helps to explain most of these things. While this theory has its issues, I do think it helps to explain a lot of problems that people have with these systems, and can even help explain problems that a lot of people don't even think about anymore. Okay, for those who haven't played or looked at the lore of Undertale for a while, here is a quick recap of things we know for sure about determination and magic. First of all, determination is found within humans and monster souls. A lot of people don't realize that monster souls have determination, but a lot of the things in the games actually do prove this. The biggest example being Undying the Undying. Determination can be found more in human souls than monsters. I don't think I really have to explain this one too much because a lot of people already kind of assume this. Determination is able to be produced naturally even in monsters, again Undying the Undying as an example. Determination is able to be both extracted and injected. Because of these two traits, we can assume that determination then is a liquid, because it's very hard to extract or inject a solid, and gases are known to be dangerous to inject into living creatures. Determination gives souls power to persist after death with enough of it. As I mentioned before, monster souls have determination, just not enough to persist after death. A monster soul and their body with too much determination will melt. Amalgamations, Undying the Undying are both examples of this. Magic is found within human souls and monster souls, and magic is found more in monster souls than humans. We know humans have magic because they use magic to create the barrier. Monster bodies are made up of more magic than matter. We know they have matter in them because they turn to dust, which is a physical substance. Monster magic often takes shape reflecting mannerisms of interest of the enemy. I think this is almost a direct quote from the game, and also I think I misread this. I think it's more to say that it takes the interest of the monster. Using these two facts, it can be assumed that monster bodies also take shape based on the mannerisms and interests. Magic can be infused into items. This happens quite a few times, and even the more animalistic monsters like a frogget have great control over their magic. Here's some of the stuff I'm going to try and prove within my theory. The first thing is, I think a human soul will also melt if it gets too much determination in the same way a monster soul does. Humans can absorb human souls, it's just way too dangerous for anyone to actually do it. The whole premise of this theory comes from the idea that a soul has a ratio between their determination and the weak or base magic within their soul. Human souls and monster souls get absorbed by souls in different methods. I'll talk more on that later. Humans have a max safe determination level of 9, while monsters have a max of 5. Basically, if you're above the max save, you'll start to melt like we see with amalgamations. A monster determination level can actually be figured out based on the way they die. As for things I'm going to prove about magic is, magic is amplified by determination. Humans absorbing monster souls absorb magic and not their determination. A monster base weak magic is times by determination to get their maximum strength. Here we have a monster's body is an extension of its soul, while a human's body is but only like a vessel of their soul. I think this is actually kind of proven directly in Deltarune, but of course there's a lot of discussions whether Deltarune works in the same exact way with magic and determination. So I'm going to try and prove it within only Undertale for now. The magic ratio is determination magic. The average human is 7-3. Average monster is 1-5. Some monsters like boss monsters could be a 3 determination. a monster base magic level can be figured out based on their death and amount of EXP gained. You do need to know their determination level first, though. Okay, before we get too deep into this theory, I'm gonna make a baseline for what the magic ratio actually is. So, based on the fact that you either need a human to absorb a monster soul, or in our case, a boss monster soul, or any monster to absorb a human soul to pass barrier, it can be assumed that the power of a human soul absorbing a boss monster is the same as a regular monster absorbing a human soul. This means that we can assume that a human soul can't also be absorbing the determination of a monster, because a boss monster would have a lot more base determination than a regular monster, meaning that it can be assumed that what's actually being absorbed is the magic of the monster. While obviously monsters in that case would only be absorbing the determination and not the magic, because both examples need to equal the same amount of determination and magic in the end. If both can function in the same way, we can assume that determination and magic are similar in function, meaning that, as we know from TrueLab, determination being a liquid, that magic could logically also be a physical substance that's found within a soul. Based on all the examples of magic we see, especially through bullets, we see it to be able to change to whatever shape it wants, and also easily flow there. Also, we know when a monster dies or turns to dust, it makes a sound that resembles air escaping. This could be used to argue that magic is a form of gas. This will make it different enough from determination while keeping it in the same idea. And here's just a quick example or comparison between the air releasing and death sound. Obviously, the two are quite different, but that's because the death sound is 8-bit, while the pressure sound is a little bit too extreme, but it was kind of hard to find good sounds of air releasing. But at the end of the day, you can probably still hear air release from the death sounds. For the ratio itself, I split it between two variables. These variables will change from soul to soul. You have the amount of determination in ounces, and also the smallest volume that magic can be held in. As magic is a gas, as I mentioned before, this means that it can be compacted down into a smaller thing up in the pressure. The number for the M number is the smallest this can be. This ratio works so that you can see the weakest magic potential and the strongest. This works by, you look at the M number, and that's the weakest, but if you times that number by the determination number, you'll get the strongest it can be. The reason I say this is because we see that determination amplifies magic, as in the Undying fights, or Undying the Undying fight even. Also, this ratio more so shows the amount of ounces of determination that can be stored within each of the smallest bits of magic. The ratio itself can also be used to explain why we get as much EXP as we do per enemy, and also allows us to figure out the magic volume of a killable monster if we know its determination level first. This can also work vice versa. The basic sum to get EXP is determination times magic, and then both of those times by 10. And you can reverse this to figure out the other two variables. Now I'm going to show examples how the ratio works with monsters, and also how it works with a monster gaining more determination. So, as I've mentioned, all monsters naturally contain determination, but in different amounts. Number 1, we have monsters that die instantly. This is a Frogget, or any monster we see throughout the game. These monsters have 1 determination. Monsters that have enough determination to have final words, like Pyrus or Undying, would have 2 determination in the ratio. And finally, boss monsters whose souls exist for a moment post-death are likely having 3 determination. We can also get an example during the Genocide run of higher natural determination levels with Undying the Undying. So we can see here, Undying has 2 determination because she has final words after death, but her soul breaks before her body turns to dust. Based on what we can see that taking place in the transformation, it appears that Undying gains more determination because of how much energy she puts towards wanting the player dead, also how much energy she puts towards wanting to protect her friends and family. Based on this, we can assume that Undying's determination level is the only thing here that actually increases, but her higher determination allows for a higher maximum magic output, as we've explained in the issue before. This also explains her style change. As her magic is being amplified more, her desires to protect her friends is also amplified. And as magic takes a monster's desires and hopes to make its form, it makes sense that a stronger magic output will give the magic a stronger form. This also explains why her HP and defense are higher, because her determination has given her physical form a higher power. As Space Undying is able to have last words, as I mentioned before, she has a DT level of 2, but in her Undying form, using the experience sum to figure out her new determination level, which I'm going to do quickly, which if we look, Undying gives regular Undying gives 500 XP, and has a DT level of 2, so putting that all in the sum, gives us a magic output of 25, or base magic of 25. While for Undying, we now know the base magic for Undying and the XP, so we put those both in, we can then get a 6, which means that Undying's determination level is a 6, meaning that she's increased 4 levels of determination, but also that she's 1 level above the safe amount of determination a monster can have. Okay, so now I'm going to give some example of monster ratios found within the game. A lot of them are as you expect. Surprisingly though, Melvit only has 1 determination because she doesn't actually say anything after releasing all of her health. She just turns to dust instantly. Also, Metatron's magic is quite high, and it is possible that his robot body gives him a boost to the magic, but we never see him before getting the robot form, so we can't tell if there is an actual increase in like magic. Also, I think I should say now, after Undying the Undying, all of the EXP gained from monsters is just to get you to the next level and doesn't actually reflect the monster, like, the ratio, because otherwise Metal Neo would give 10,000 EXP and Sans would give like 90,000 EXP. So I'm just gonna make safe and say after that point it's more like the dramatic effect than actual like lore. Okay, now I'm going to go in more detail about what different levels of determination mean for a soul. At level 1, as you see with most monsters, they will die instantly after going to 0 HP. Level 2, the soul is able to keep the host alive for a second after going to 0 HP. Level 3 is boss monsters, meaning that they're able to, the soul is able to survive even after its host's death. Only for a moment though. Number 4, the soul is able to come back to life, but it will probably lose most of its magical and physical form, leading it to die soon after. At level 5, it is able to come back without dying, but it will lose most of its magic, and also, if it's got any physical damage, it won't be able to heal it. Level 6, a monster can come back to life, stronger than before, and able to keep its form for a decent while, but unfortunately it will melt like we see with Undying. 7, at this point, number 7 becomes the human soul. We know 7 has a deep connection to human souls, because we know it was 7 sorcerers who made the barrier, and also we know you need 7 human souls to become gods. So 7 seems like a good number to put humans at. Also, this is most likely the number that the amalgamations get to before melting. And at 7, a soul also gains power to persist even after death, like we see with the amalgamations and also any human soul. At level 8, we see Frisk. This gives a soul the power to go backwards in time to a save file, allowing them to somewhat cheat death. At level 9, we find most likely Kara, because we know it's 9 because Kara loves the number 9, because they always are trying to get to the highest point, and they describe the highest point to be the number 9. And also, I think true pacifist Frisk is here, because I think at this level, a soul gains the power to like recombine after death as many times as it wants, as we see in the Astral Treatment fight. This is also the max level a human can naturally become without dying. And above that, I think we find Genokara, and at this point, a soul, even though human soul can't handle this much determination, and will begin to melt. More on this later. Now then, I think it's time to talk more on how the amalgamates work in my theory. The amalgamates that are found in the True Lab, we can assume have all 6 souls injected into them of Wealth of Determination, because Alphys in an entry mentions using multiple souls, and there's no sign that she would have used only 2 or 3. Looking at what we can see happen when they are injected with determination, we can see what their new level is. As they come back to life, they have to have at least 4 determination in them, as I mentioned before. But we also know that they melt after a while, so 6 or higher is more likely. We can narrow down even more by taking the fact we know that most likely all 6 human souls were used at this point, and also the fact that all the monsters we find are related to other monsters we've seen who have 1 determination, meaning that these monsters, before they were died, would have had 1 determination in them. We can gather that the souls, the human souls, still have determination after being extracted, as they don't break, and that they possibly regain back up to 7 after being extracted from. This would likely mean that we could assume a very small amount was taken from each soul, most likely 1 ounce from each, giving us 6 ounces of determination added onto the already 1 ounce that the monsters had, would mean that the monsters go up to 7 determination, which would mean their souls can persist after death, which is what Alphys said they wanted to happen. This actually likely explains why the amalgams don't die like Undyne does in the fight, because they have enough determination to persist. And unlike human souls, monster bodies are made out of magic which come from their souls, meaning that their bodies are more like extensions of their souls, while humans more have bodies that are vessels for their souls. This means that the monsters who are amalgams can't die. Monster souls still can't handle this such determination, so even though they can persist, they'll still continue to melt, and even more so than Undyne. As they melt, they will lose determination. I'll get back to this idea later. But as there are other monsters nearby, I think when they melt together, their souls fuse together with this lower amount of determination. And as their souls fuse together, it meant that their souls had enough power and mass to be able to use this amount of determination. Because of the fact that their bodies are extensions of their souls, I think this means that with the super high magic and determination they now have, and their ability to persist after death, this explains the reason why it's impossible to kill the amalgamations, no matter what you do. Now, we've talked about all the amalgamations, and I mentioned the idea that we know an amalgamation has to fuse with another one in order to handle seven determination. But theoretically, it could be possible that if one of these monsters was to naturally gain enough determination to outweigh the amount they were losing, they could get themselves to a safe level to determination. They could get themselves to a safe level of determination, closer to 5, and be able to survive without having to fuse with another monster. This lines up quite well with what we see in Snowdrake's mother. Snowdrake's mother is interesting because she shows no sign of having other monsters in her, and instead only showed traits from Snowdrake's mother's personality, saying stuff like Snowy when you try to spare her. We could say, based on this information, that Snowdrake's mother gained natural determination based on the fact that they tried to survive to get to Snowy, or tried to survive for Snowy even, which is similar to what we see with Undyne. The reason I'm so sure Snowy's mum has lower determination than the other amalgams is the fact, in the code, it is possible to kill her, because the defense is lower than any other amalgam, making it actually not unkillable. Now then, I'm going to try and explain why amalgamations and monsters melt. Because we all agree at this point that if a monster has too much determination, they melt because their soul can't handle it. But I don't think we talk enough about what is actually happening when they melt. As I mentioned earlier, I think that a monster, when they melt, loses their determination. And while a lot of this will be speculation, because you don't have enough information on the matter, I do think that the idea I'm going to explain works well with this theory. My idea is that when a monster has too much determination, its soul is no longer able to keep it all in. This also works with humans. And when it can't keep it in, the liquid will start bursting through the soul. And as we know from magic, when magic leaves the soul, it becomes part of the monster's body. So if the same happens with the liquid bursting out of the soul, it would then mean that this liquid is now becoming part of their body. And as liquid is too dense to keep the shape of the monster, it will start melting and slowly pouring to the ground, as we see with the amalgams and Undyne. And as it's pouring out, the determination will actually be leaving its soul until the monster no longer has enough determination to stay alive. Okay, so now, the final thing I want to bring up in this theory is the idea of soul absorbing and how it works in the context of my theory. We know that a human soul is able to absorb a monster soul to gain the power to cross the barrier, and we know the same is the other way around. But I had the question of, how can a monster soul gain determination when a soul can't handle it in most other cases? And I believe the fact that monster souls break after death is the answer to this. I think we can assume that a human soul, when absorbing a monster soul, takes the magic from said soul and then leaves the physical soul to break. The reason I say this is because we know that monster souls will break after a while, and if a human soul just absorbed the soul straight into them, it wouldn't do anything because the monster soul would end up breaking after a few seconds. So I don't think this is how it works, and instead I think a human soul takes the power from another soul and absorbs that power into themselves and leaves the other soul without any power. For a human soul to be absorbed, they don't take its power because the monster would end up dying. Instead, I think it works like instead of a server would, which when you have like a computer, you can connect it to other computers across the room, and then you can use their processing power to run more than you'd be able to do on one computer alone. I think this is the case of Soul's determination. And I think there's a lot of evidence from this, based on the fact that in the Omega Flurry fight, the souls are able to appear on their own and take over Flowey. And also, we know this isn't just a thing with human souls being absorbed in this way, because the same thing happens when Azrael absorbs monster souls, as the monster souls still exist within him, and they don't end up breaking. Okay, this is one of the more out there parts of this theory, as it's an idea that no one else, I don't think I've seen, even tried to argue before. But I'm going to argue that, number one, humans are able to absorb a human soul, and number two, humans will melt with too much determination. I'm finally getting on to explain this bit, and I think it's very interesting, like what it means for the lore of Undertale. So number one, if we look at Kara, that's at the Undertale side. At this point, Kara likely has 9 or higher determination. 9 is very heavily connected to Kara because she's always trying to get to the max, and she describes 9 as being the max. And as you can see, that when she starts using this determination to destroy the world, her face begins to melt, like her mouth droops open, her eyes get bigger and like almost like liquidy, and it seems like she's melting. And I think this is our main piece of evidence that high determination in a human causes them to melt, but in a different way. Now, also, I think, quickly, the idea that a human absorbing another human soul is possible, but dangerous, because, as I mentioned in the last section, if a human absorbs a soul, it just takes the soul's power straight away. So if a human absorbs a human soul, it would just take their determination straight away, meaning that a human absorbing a human would go up to like 14 at least determination, which is 5 above the safe amount we see with Kara. And as you can see down there, I gave an example of what happened if Clover absorbed the red soul. And the reason, I think, that the sign of the face melting is a sign of the soul melting is because when a monster melts, it's because the soul is directly connected to the body, as the soul is what is creating the body's form. But with a human, the body and the soul are separate. So when the soul melts in a human, it doesn't end up melting the body. Instead, it just ends up melting inside of the body, which is why it comes out of the eyes and mouth, because those are most likely the quickest exit for them, and they find any hole available to leave the liquid from, which you can see from the really poorly made demonstration down below. Now, I know for a fact that this theory is nowhere near perfect. It's got a lot of holes and a lot of problems, but I do think it explains enough stuff in a nice enough way for me to share it. But I do want to bring up 3 of the issues and some possible solutions, but I would love some people to give some insight to what they think a solution could be for these issues. The first one comes in Toriel. The issue with Toriel is, if you take out EXP and determination level, you get a ratio of 3 determination for 5 magic, which means she's really weak, especially for a boss monster. The only thing I can give to explain this fact is that we know she has to be at least a bit weaker than Papyrus, because both Papyrus and her do not want to kill the human, but Toriel is able to accidentally kill the human, while Papyrus is able to change the damage of his bullets to not kill the human, which could be a sign that her magic is weaker, but it still just feels weird. The next problem is Flowey in general. As Flowey doesn't have a soul, it's really hard to figure him out for this theory. And the fact that we know he has to have higher determination than a regular human, because he's able to use save files, but the fact Friska's determination is higher than his, because Friska's save file overwrites his, means that he most likely has 7, maybe even 7.5 determination. But if he has that much determination, why does he need 7 human souls to become God, when he has enough determination to count as a human soul? The only answer I can give to this is that because of the fact he is a soul himself, the determination is flowing through his whole body, making it more potent, even though there's probably less of it, around like maybe 4 or 5. But either way, Flowey is weird. The final and biggest issue that I'm sure a lot of people by this point have like seen themselves is the fact it stated that it takes every single monster soul to equal the power of one human soul. This fact has always bugged me, but I've never known how to explain it in any theory I've made. The only thing I can say is that even maybe the ratios are correct, it's just that humans have more of it, like more determination in them than a monster. But still, the amount more they would need is insane, even without this theory. So it's just always been a fact that's confused me. But anyway, those are my 3 problems I found with this theory. I have some solutions, but if you can think of anything else, then just, leave a comment down below. And yeah, that's my theory on magic. While I do think it has its issues, that's not really the point of this. I think the point of this is to make people think about magic and determination in a way they didn't before. So my whole goal of this is just to try and figure out a fun solution with a bit of evidence that maybe if you take ideas from, you could come up with a better solution to this. But either way, it's my first attempt at a proper theory, and I'm proud of it. If you watched all the way to this one, it probably means you didn't hate the video and didn't hate the theory. So if that's the case, then I don't know, leave a subscription and a like, because I am a new channel, at least as of this video coming out. If you want to see more theory content, I would recommend going and checking my Deltarune theory review video, where I review a few of the more popular Deltarune theories. Or, if you want more Undertale videos, then I would recommend going and waiting until next Friday, when I have a Undertale video about a certain skeleton and his fan works. Either way, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time.